Welcome to today's report on the war in Ukraine. You are listening to the account with the news for day 338. Thank you for joining me today. Today is Holocaust Remembrance Day, and I will start with a quick update on that topic. I also have another article by the Ukrainska Pravda to share. Otherwise, they were only minor news. So, as usual, they are grouped into the situation inside Ukraine, the occupied territories, Russia and Belarus, and the international developments. And before we start the report, a quick update on today. Today is the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. On January 27, 1945, the Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland was liberated by the Red Army. For the first time in 78 years, Russia was not invited to the ceremony. The director of the museum likened the war in Ukraine to the horrors of the Holocaust. Russia accused the museum of attempting to rewrite history. Now for a look at the flashpoints along the front. Kreminna. Reports indicate that Russia has deployed its elite 76th Guards Air Assault Division to defend Kreminna. Intense fighting is happening south of Kuzmine. Bakhmut. Attacks still happen in eastern Bakhmut, but Russia is currently at a standstill. Klishchivka and the heights are claimed to be under Russian control, and sources report attacks on Ivanivske. The General Staff of Ukraine reported repelled attacks around Klishchivka. Vuhledar. Russia continues its attack waves on the settlement. So far, all attacks have been repelled, with Russia taking massive losses. Ukrainian sources claim some Russian units suffered 80 to 90% casualties. This is corroborated by video and picture evidence. Russian attempts to gain footholds or outflank the settlement failed. We have seen claims that Russian soldiers had to call artillery strikes on themselves. And to start the news segment, the article by the Ukrainska Pravda I wanted to point out, titled "Those Who Save Us from Darkness: Stories of Power Engineers Killed by Russian Aggression." The article tells the stories of Mykola Zakhno and Oleksiy Chernikov. Mykola had worked 35 years in the energy sector, while Oleksiy only had 4 years of experience. Both were described as kind, caring, and calm by their families. Both were power engineers employed by Kyiv Teploenergo and, on October 18, 2022, were simply out doing their job. It was also the day air raid sirens would sound throughout Ukraine. Please check out the article. Now for a look at all the minor news out of Ukraine. A nationwide poll suggests that after the start of the war, Ukrainians gained a positive attitude towards their country. 75% say they are proud to be Ukrainian. Ukrenergo announced power cuts in 10 oblasts following yesterday's missile attack by Russia. The Air Force, meanwhile, reported that Russia is prioritizing energy infrastructure as targets for their Kinzhal missiles. According to Mikhailo Fedorov, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Digital Transformation, so-called Shahed Hunter drones are already active in Ukraine and help protect energy facilities. The President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, announced that Ukraine is in need of 300 to 500 tanks to carry out a successful counteroffensive and liberate occupied territories. Oleksiy Danilov, Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, suggested there's a chance F-16s will soon be in Ukrainian skies. While Ukrainian politicians lately have adapted a trend to post puzzles on social media to break important news, so far there has been no announcement about the F-16 issue. Next up, the latest regarding the situation in the occupied territories. According to the National Resistance Center, Russia has started deporting the families of soldiers of the so-called Second Army Corps of the LPR to the territory of the Russian Federation. In turn, Russia is moving its own citizens to Luhansk in a bid to change the demographic composition. The National Resistance Center further reported that Russian authorities are preparing new filtration measures in occupied Zaporizhia and Kherson oblasts. The Ministry of Industry and Trade of the Russian Federation has begun preparation to synchronize Russian legislation in the annexed territories. Therefore, those territories need to be in the same time zone as Moscow. Moving on to the news updates from Russia and Belarus. At Moscow's Vnukovo airport, an Mi-8 helicopter of the Special Flight Unit Russia crashed. The unit is in charge of transporting the top leadership of Russia, including the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Human error is the suspected cause of the accident. The spokeswoman of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Maria Zakharova, suggested that NATO will be responsible for prolonging the war by sending tanks to Ukraine. Mikhailo Podolyak, the advisor of the head of the Ukrainian president's office, responded by reminding her that Russia is murdering civilians and that the help by NATO is for the defense of Ukraine and its right to life. Cybersecurity specialists of Ukraine's security service have foiled a Russian cyber attack. Russian hackers tried to gain access to security cameras in residential complexes to collect intelligence data. They were interested in the general situation of the city, addresses of security forces, and the movement on nearby roads. It is suggested that the Quran burning in Sweden by far-right activist Rasmus Paludan was an operation by the Russian special services. And to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. In a press briefing, the Pentagon has confirmed plans to transfer the Abrams M1A2 tanks and not the A1 version to Ukraine. According to John Kirby, a White House national security spokesperson, the tanks will take many months before they can get on the ground in Ukraine. In the same Pentagon press briefing, the possible transfer of American F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine in the future was not ruled out. Meanwhile, the chief operating officer at Lockheed Martin said his company is ready to increase production of the F-16 to meet the possible demand. The UK has suggested that a massive arms factory must be built in Poland to supply Ukraine. Supplying Kyiv with various supply chains and weaponry types is unsustainable. A long-term strategy to make sure Ukraine can defend itself is needed. Ukrainian soldiers have arrived in Germany to train to operate the Marder infantry fighting vehicle. Training is expected to begin in the near future, with the vehicles to enter service in late winter. The Prime Minister of Poland stated in an interview that besides a company of Leopard 2 tanks, his country is ready to send another 60 modernized Soviet tanks, including PT-91, to Ukraine. Germany handed over a new package of military aid to Ukraine, which includes ammunition for IRIS-T air defense systems and other non-combat equipment. Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, has stated that North Korea will always stand together on the same battlefield with the Russian army. And now for the intelligence report segment, starting as usual with the UK Ministry of Defense. Over the last 6 days, Russian online commentators have claimed Russian forces have made significant advances breaking through Ukrainian defenses in 2 areas, in Zaporizhia Oblast near Kyiv and 100 kilometers to the east in Donetsk Oblast near Volodar. Russian units have probably conducted local probing attacks near Kyiv and Volodar, but it is highly unlikely that Russia has actually achieved any substantive advances. There is a realistic possibility that Russian military sources are deliberately spreading misinformation in an effort to imply that the Russian operation is sustaining momentum. A look at the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. The researchers argue that the recent altercation between Yevgeny Prigozhin, head of the Wagner PMC, and former Russian officer Igor Girkin is showing the competition among Russian nationalist groups for political power in Russia. The Institute previously assessed that there are 3 distinct factions among Russian nationalists which pursue different objectives while unilaterally criticizing the Russian Ministry of Defense. First, Russian or proxy veterans. Second, nationalists who employ their own security forces. Third, Russian military bloggers and war correspondents. In this case, Girkin represents the veterans, while Prigozhin is a nationalist who owns a private army. It is suggested that both are fighting for influence and patronage among pro-war politicians disillusioned with the progress of the war. The researchers assess that Prigozhin's attack on Girkin may benefit Putin and is likely an attempt to gain influence and avoid a similar fate as Girkin, who was removed from his positions after the retreat from Sloviansk and his involvement in the downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. There is an increase in the activity of the enemy's aircraft in all directions. The Russian occupiers launched 24 airstrikes and 7 missile strikes during the day. More than 30 attacks were also carried out from rocket salvo systems, as a result of the attacks of the Russian Federation on the civilian infrastructure of the cities of Kinzhal in the Kharkiv region, Chasiv Yar in the Donetsk region, the village of Kamishani, and the city of Kherson. Civilians have been killed and wounded. The building of the regional civil infectious disease hospital in Kherson was damaged. Despite significant losses, in order to improve the tactical position, the enemy continues offensive actions in the Bakhmut, Liman, Avdiivka and Novopavlivka directions. In the Kupiansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson direction, the enemy is defending. The enemy continues to use the network of civilian healthcare facilities in the temporarily occupied territory to treat its wounded soldiers. For example, in the city of Hrustalny, Rovenkiv district, Luhansk region, in the premises of the city hospital, the occupiers set up a field hospital where Russian servicemen and mercenaries of the Wagner PMC are being treated. At the same time, Russian occupiers are also being treated in Cairo, Kakhovsky district, Kherson region, on the premises of the Cairo Psychoneurological Boarding School. Russia continues to steal. According to the available information, in Enerhoda since February 2nd, the enemy is creating a commission at the nuclear power plant to check 2 power lines of 750 kilowatt each, in order to plan restoration works and supply power for the transit of electricity from the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant to Russia. In the temporarily occupied resort village of Zalizny Port, Skadovsky district, Kherson region, the Russian so-called administration is carrying out a census and confiscation of businesses, boarding houses, cafes, restaurants, that have not been re-registered under Russian law from Ukrainian citizens. And with that, another report is finished. If you're interested in any of the articles, you can find links to them in the description as always. Thank you for tuning in, and have a great day. You were listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.